Hello, everyone. I'm Cindy Runger, president of Seattle Rotary, and I'm happy to welcome you to our first Rotary meeting of 2019. Yeah! Cheers. A fresh start and an opportunity to get it right. So I know we have several visitors here today, and it's great to see you all. So for those of you who are new to Rotary, there are 1.2 million of us Rotarians around the world. And Seattle Rotary, this club, is one of the largest Rotary clubs in the world. And because of this distinction, we are the one place where you can make an impact locally and globally. You can also meet a dynamic network of community and business leaders and hear from world-class speakers. So speaking of world-class speakers, we're gonna kick off this new year with Bob Donegan, president of, yes. You're clapping because you all know the Seattle icon Ivar's, and his presence is timely in many ways. I can't wait. And I would like to welcome past President Skip Cotkins for the inspiration. Skip.
So one of the advantages of having gray Rotary hair is I remember when our club met at the old Olympic Hotel and it started with an open bar. You said we don't drink. We drank in those days. And interestingly enough, a couple of weeks ago, I ran into our past member, Gary Houlihan, whose dad, Dick Houlihan, some of you may have remembered, was the founder of the Rotary Rogues. So it's great to see them continuing on. Anyway, so this is our first meeting of 2019, which got me thinking, what is it about New Year's? We are culturally conditioned to think that the New Year is some sort of Gregorian Big Bang. But in the Jewish tradition, New Year's is the first day of the 7th month, celebrating not the lunar calendar, but the harvest. The Rotary New Year and many of the nonprofits are on July 1st New Year. And the new school year starts usually right after Labor Day. And for those in whom hope springs eternal, pitchers and catchers report in 5 weeks. So let's face it, there's lots of New Years in our lives, not just January 1st. Of course, those who sell gym memberships and weight loss programs know that New Year's resolutions are alive and well. But we are Rotarians, and by definition, a group of people who have proven that we don't need to be spurred into action. Are we supposed to somehow draw extra motivation from turning the page of the calendar? Years ago, I was at the RI International Convention in Taipei, and I saw a bumper sticker, which I never forgot, and it said, "Get out of the way, here comes Rotary." So, what can we resolve for the new year? To connect for good, as President Cindy has urged us, to call more pass plays when the run isn't working, to eat more chowder, that'll cost you, Donegan, spend more time with family and friends, stop writing 2018 on our checks, or pay it forward in the Starbucks line and make a complete stranger smile and maybe even inspire them to do the same. Or maybe, just maybe, it isn't to resolve because the calendar tells us that to do so, but to be tuned into our own internal calendars that tells us that now, whenever that might be, is the time to seize an opportunity, start something exciting, double down on what makes us happy, and then dive fearlessly into whatever that is. I hope you'll be inspired by this quote from Mark Victor Hansen, the author of the wildly popular book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. He said, "Don't wait until everything is just right. It'll never be perfect. There will always be challenges, obstacles, and less than perfect conditions. So what? Get started now. With each step you take, you will grow stronger and stronger, more and more skilled, more and more self-confident, and more successful." Happy New Year.
So now for our main program. I'd like to bring up Shell Stone to introduce our main program. So just a few facts about Shell. She's a go-getter. She commutes every single day on her motorcycle to Ivar's, where she's been at work for 4 years. And she's a girl after my own heart, because when I was working at Piper Jaffray, living in Ballard, I used to commute on my Kawasaki Ninja. Good times. She's also on the development committee for the Seattle Sports Commission, is a TED Talk addict, and also plans on celebrating her 30th birthday this spring by jumping out of a perfectly good plane. Please help me welcome Shell to the podium.
So So today I'm happy to introduce my mentor and my boss, Bob Donegan. Bob has helped manage Ivar since 1997. He joined the company as a chief financial officer and was asked by his partners to become the president on 9/11 after another of their partners had passed. Since then, the company's employment, store count, and revenues have tripled. Bob believes that if you take care of your employees, they'll take care of your customers. That strongly shows with the increased revenue and employee retention. He takes the time to get to know all of his employees' names and greets everyone no matter which location he is at. The company continues to be a favorite among consumers and was named Best Seafood in Evening Magazine's viewers poll last month. Bob has more energy than anyone that I know. In addition to Ivar's, Bob is involved in many community activities. He serves on the boards of the Seattle Chamber, the Seattle Aquarium, the Seattle Sports Commission, the Washington Hospitality Association, his Seattle Historic Waterfront Association, and the Economic Advisory Board of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. He has been an active and vocal member of the downtown and waterfront communities and was one of the individuals who created the Tunnel and Transit Solution, which resulted in Bertha's Tunnel, and served on the design and operating committee for the new seawall and waterfront park. Bob and his wife Lisa moved to Seattle in 1984 so she could teach at UW Business School. They have 2 daughters and a new granddaughter that live in Richmond Beach. If you haven't already, I would ask you to put your masks on to welcome Bob. I can snap a quick photo of everybody.
So thanks, Miss Michelle, and thanks, Todd. You know, that was the second time today that the Old Settler song was sung in Puget Sound. Do you know who sang it the first time? I'll give you a hint. When he shaves every morning, he sings the Old Settler song. Jay Inslee. So about 5 years ago, I was at my desk late, and my phone started to blow up. And it was people texting me, "What did you pay him?" It was his first trade mission to China, and he was talking about coming over so that the Chinese would buy more Boeing airplanes, Starbucks coffee, and Ivar's chowder. So when he came back, I sent him and Trudy some chowder at the governor's mansion, and he told me the story of the Old Settler song. So thanks for coming. Are we moving? Okay, great. On the walk up, I discovered that the University of Alabama is opening a new campus in the Philippines. Did you see that? They're going to move the football team over there to play as well and call them the Manila Folders. Okay, are we warmed up? So 2 years ago when we talked about the waterfront park, I told that same joke, so if you remember it, great. If you don't, welcome to being old-aged. So here's a picture of Ivar Haglund. He was born in West Seattle in 1905, a single child of single children. His father was Norwegian, his mother was Swedish, and he was a little boy. Here he is as a 10-year-old. You can see he's not even bigger than his guitar. Because he was alone, he learned to entertain himself by singing and pretending he was on radio shows. He graduated from the University of Washington in 1928 with the well-timed degree as a stockbroker. So when the Depression hit in 1929, people stopped paying rent to his family in West Seattle. They owned the hotel, they owned a bunch of houses, they owned commercial properties, and Ivar had to get a job. So he had visited cousins of his down on the coast in Seaside, Oregon. They were dipping marine life out of the bay and charging people a nickel to see it. And in 1937, near where Salty's sits in West Seattle, he opened one of Seattle's first aquariums. Nobody came to visit. So August 1st, 1938, down on the waterfront on Pier 3, That's what this picture is. He opened one of Seattle's first aquariums in a new location. And if you look just to the left of the totem pole, the telephone pole, you can see the octopus there, which showed the entrance to the aquarium. And if you look very carefully at the car that's passing by Seneca Street, right there on Alaska Way, you can see Henry Kotkins driving a young Skip to school. So here's how Ivar collected his marine life. He's off Alki Point. You see him there in his little hat and his Fisher waders. This is what it looked like inside the aquarium. It was very simple. He used his skills as a marketing and communications person. He would load Patsy the seal in a stroller and take her up to Frederick and Nelson every year to have his picture taken with Santa. Of course, this was front page news in the Times and the PI. But he also knew that when people came to the waterfront, they had to get something to eat. So he opened this fish bar in the southeast corner of Pier 54. By the way, does anybody know why the piers changed from Pier 3 to Pier 54? During the Second World War, the Navy came to town to pick up munitions and drop people off, and the piers were not numbered geographically. They were numbered in the order in which they were built. So they were all over the harbor. So by the act of war, the Navy was given the right to renumber harbor piers all throughout the country. Do you know when the crack U.S. Navy finished the renumbering? 1946, after the war was over. So here's the fish bar. He was soon getting more guests at the fish bar than he was at the aquarium. So he closed the aquarium and he donated the marine life to the Vancouver Aquarium. And if you visit Stanley Park, the picture here, the descendants of Ivar's original marine life are still there. All through the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, Ivar was the single biggest advertiser on Vancouver and British Columbia radio. And when Vancouverites visited Seattle, he accepted their Canadian currency at par. So it was a big thing. This is what Acres of Clams looked like in 1946 when it was opened. You see the typical Japanese floats and fishing nets. He used his marketing skill. He knew that many people could see down on the top of Pier 54. So he covered the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning system with an octopus to communicate what was there. And here's a famous picture. Does anybody recognize the mistake in this picture? And Skip, you can't answer this because you know that answer. So look at the bus. There's no trolley line on the waterfront. So in 1951, when Ivar painted the bus, he wanted a picture taken of it. So he hired a tow truck, went up to First Avenue, unhooked a bus during rush hour, brought it down to the waterfront. If you look at the people standing in front of the bus, those are all the riders of the bus. And if you look under the A, you can see Ivar standing there just to the left of Seidenquist, the chef. Took the picture, gave everybody a certificate thanking them for allowing him to disrupt their commute, put him back on the bus, took it back up. And the city found out about this when this ad appeared in the Seattle Times and the PI. Can you imagine anybody doing something like that today? So in addition to the restaurants, Ivar was a restaurant innovator. And here's an example of it. This is the Ivar's on Broadway, which we think was the first food court in the world. There was one window where you could get seafood. And there was another window where you could get Mexican food. And to cook that Mexican food, he brought a family from Mexico, the Arredondo family. Look at the price of that plate. And he had another window where you could buy Chinese food, for which he brought a family from China to cook. And then the last window served pizza. He never understood why he didn't sell very many pizzas until one of the servers said to him, "You know, Ivar, if you didn't have that trout with his eye looking up at you, maybe you'd sell more trout pizza." So this picture also is a hint of what's going to come. The guy standing in the middle is Bob Lazenby. He's our current longest tenure employee. He worked for Ivar's for 50 years. He died in Grays Harbor last October, and his 50 years is about to be surpassed by 4 people who are above 45 years. Let's go back to that picture. Does anybody recognize the 2 guys in the middle of the picture, one of whom has a lay-on? This is up near Seattle U, This picture was taken in the early 50s. Those are the O'Brien twins. They were the boys who played basketball on one of the few teams to beat the Harlem Globetrotters. They were both drafted by the Pittsburgh Pirates and played as twin brothers on the Pirates team. So Ivar was always active in the community. When the World's Fair Committee was created, of course, he was one of them. He was on the Wawona Restoration Committee. Here's the ad he ran in the PI when the World's Fair started, and you can see a picture of Ivar's location there. He gathered the flotsam and jetsam that was the exterior of the building, and when you visit the Salmon House and look up on the wall, all the driftwood is the stuff that used to be on the outside of this facility from the World's Fair. In 1964, the city was going through a budget crisis. Sound familiar? And they didn't have someone to put the fireworks on. Ivar was a closet pyrotechnician. So they went to him and asked if he would put it on. So in 1964, off Duck Island in Green Lake, he put the fireworks on. And this great poster is based on the HIT Fireworks Company poster. HIT was located down on Rainier Avenue. There was a fireworks factory in the middle of Seattle. And they supplied our fireworks up until the time that they went out of business. Ivar frequently visited Asia, and on one of his Asian trips he came back and he called Nick Nickerson, a real estate broker, and said, I want to open Ivar's Roman baths on a barge in Ballard. And Nick said, Ivar, what is wrong with you? You don't know anything about baths and barges. You're a seafood guy. So he found him a site. Do you recognize this site? Well, this is what it looked like this summer. That's where the Salmon House was built. And this is what the Salmon House looks like inside. We began remodeling the Salmon House 6 years ago, and we wanted to put a fireplace back in the middle of the restaurant. And when we took the permit drawings to the fire department, they said, this is a solid cedar building. There's no steel in it. No, you can't put a fireplace in it. So Ivar bought the Smith Tower. When you visit us in the office, the chairs you'll sit in are the chairs that were at Ivar's China Room at the base of the pyramid at the Smith Tower. And just before he died in January 1985, he sold the Smith Tower. Ivar had no kids, had 2 wives, no children. So his $11.5 million estate was split between the University of Washington Business School, from which he had graduated, and the School of Hospitality and Restaurant Management at Wazoo. And if you visit either of those colleges, you will find no building name for him, no endowed professorship, no mention of him. He just wanted kids to get educated. It wasn't about the publicity, it was about the purpose. So there was a provision in his will that his 5 senior lieutenants, guys in their 20s and 30s, could buy the company, and they began to do that in May of 1985. And soon thereafter, John and Bobby Morris, who started Kid Valley, had opened their 4th store and didn't know how to manage multiple stores. So they came to Ivar and said, would you buy Kid Valley? So they quickly got into the hamburger business, and there's the picture of the Burger Babe, the inappropriate logo today. If you still visit the stores, you'll find the Burger Babe appears in a corner of the store, and the new logo, 7 freestanding Kid Valleys and a bunch of locations in stadiums. Ivar also operated the captain's table at the north end of the waterfront, where Big Fish Games and F5 sat. They wanted to remodel that store, but the landlord wouldn't make the seismic improvements to do it. So they weren't going to invest the money in it, but they didn't want to lose the people who were working there. So in 1992, they bought Taylor's Landing up in Mukilteo and transferred the staff up there and operated the location next to the ferry terminal. This is what it looks like inside, and we'll come back to this one in a minute. In 1996, after about the 3,000th customer said, hey, we really like this chowder. Could we buy this for our restaurant, or could we sell this in our grocery store? The boys decided, hey, there's really something here. So they took an assistant manager out of the captain's table, and they made Chris Lewerk the chowder sales guy. And a few weeks later, he came back to the office and said, I made my first sale. It's to the Washington State Ferries. They fired him. They said, those people can't run ferries. They're going to burn our chowder. They're going to ruin our brand. Do you know who our biggest customer in the summer is? the Washington State Ferries. And Chris now has a staff of 6 internal people and dozens of brokers around the country selling chowder. The chowder is available in 13,000 places throughout the US, Canada, Mexico, China, and Japan. 1998, the Mariners came to us and asked if we would open at Safeco Field. This is the opening night, July 15th, 1999. Remember at 3:05 when the ferry horn sounded and the gates opened and people rushed in? One of our rules is we plan for failure. We knew that the cash register system was not going to work. So as soon as the gates curled up, all the cash registers in the stadium went down. But we had anticipated that, and the people we had operating the cash registers were our accounting staff. They can do math in their heads. There's 102 booths at Safeco Field. 2 of them were open that night, our 2 booths. November 27th, 1999, Rick and Terry Alger, the son and daughter-in-law of the founders of Spud, asked us, and we acquired Alki Spud. So we do business over in Alki. We made 3 changes when we bought that company. Number 1, we took the dill pickles off the counter. Number 2, we took the milkshakes out. And number 3, we took the canned clam chowder that Rick and Terry were selling, and we replaced it with our chowder. And within 2 weeks, we had hundreds of phone calls and emails and visits saying, get that lousy corporate clam chowder out of West Seattle. So I called Cisco and we got some unlabeled Cisco cups. We took the Ivar's cups out. We left our chowder in there. Rick and Terry used to sell 3 gallons of chowder a week. We sell 300 gallons of chowder a week, but it's not that lousy Ivar's chowder. So we talked about the Mukilteo restaurant at 4:25 p.m. on October 28th, 2003. The big waves came through the slot between Whidbey and Hat Island and destroyed the restaurant. The insurance inspector the next morning told us he would have us open by Christmas and it would cost $250,000. It was 471 days and $3.6 million later that we reopened. We opened at the SeaTac Airport in the Central Terminal in May of 2005 and operated one of the most successful restaurants in the airport at that time. We earned more best airport restaurants by ourselves than all other restaurants in the airport combined. In 2005, we had sold our property on the corner of Republic and Terry to Paul Allen and built a new chowder plant up in Mukilteo. This is Betsy Akers. She's our quality assurance director up in the chowder plant. We don't measure things the way anybody else does. We don't talk about gallons or pounds. Instead, we say if you took every cup of chowder that we made and poured it into an 8-ounce cup and stacked them one on top of the other, it'd be 4,547 Space Needles high. The sports division includes all the concessions at Cheney Stadium for the Rainiers, Husky Stadium, Safeco Field, T-Mobile, and CenturyLink. And if you visit any of those locations, of all the booths in the stadium, ours are always the top. So the 6 food booths that we operate at CenturyLink are number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the 48 food booths at CenturyLink. And the reason for that is because we staff really well, we cook everything fresh, and we turn over quickly. So we have 5 divisions today. 3 full-service restaurants, 21 seafood bars, 7 freestanding Kid Valleys, and 21 locations and restaurants. And here's the distillation of why I think we're in year 81. Number 1, if you ask most people, most companies why they succeed, they would say their customers or their technology. For us, the most important thing is our employees. So here's a picture of Donna and Sue when the Salmon House opened in 1970, way on the right. Here they are on their 37th anniversary in the middle at their party. Both of their daughters and grandkids work for us. Another guy, Phil, started as a cook at the Salmon House, retired after 42 years as the quality assurance guy at the chowder plant. Second rule of thumb, we hire people for enthusiasm and we train them for skills. Patrick Yearout, our director of training, is here, and he taught us a little technique. Interview people and find optimists. In restaurants, there's a crisis every 3 minutes. You don't want pessimists. You want people who think about solving problems. And this is a picture of the day that Joe Vizentainer the guy with his foot up on the statue, retired. And the staff in the restaurant at that day, there's the number of years they worked there. It's pretty typical of our locations. 3 people worked down there, had 70 plus years. Paul Lawson on the left retired on December 14th after 46 years with the company. Next thing, when you find good people, don't let them leave. So here's the crew of the Mukilteo restaurant when it reopened after the wave damage. And here is the same picture 14 years later with the people who are still employed, shown in yellow. When you find good people, don't let them leave. Here's another example. Sunday, September 28th, 2014, when we closed Acres of Clams to remodel when the seawall was going in, we took the 3 senior tenure people in the restaurant. That's Francis Remilio on the left. He was a busser and a host and a trainer. That's Mikey, who has worked in the dish pit for 43 years, washing dishes, put 2 kids and 4 grandkids through college. And Sammy Wu, who was the pantry chef, who did all the desserts, salads, and shucked all the oysters. Those 3 guys among them have 107 years of experience with the company. Here's a temporary job, a part-time job. This is Patty Nickel, who works at Safeco Field. She, last summer, celebrated her 15th anniversary with us in a part-time temporary job. We also reward people when they do a good job, and the way we do that is every year we pick the clammy winner. The clammy is a wrestler's body with his head lopped off and a clam put on. When Todd Leiwicki came to me in 2005 and asked if we would help him solve the lousy food problem at Quest Field, now CenturyLink, we asked Joe to be the person who opened our first 6 booths there. Joe loves to be in the background, and if Joe had heard he was going to get the clammy, he would have disappeared. So before the NFC Championship game in 2005-06, into that season, I asked Todd if he would participate in the game with us. I gave Joe the statue and told him he was going to present it to Todd as the clammy winner, and Todd handed it back to him. And Joe thought they missed it, so he handed it back. And Todd said, "Joe, look up on the TV screen. See the Seahawk broadcast? You're the employee of the year." Joe left the stadium, and we didn't see him for 2 weeks. He was so angry with us. Another thing we focus on is turnover. Turnover in restaurants varies between 250 and 400% a year. We pay our people well, we give them full benefits, including part-time people, and the result is, through the end of last month, our turnover company-wide is about 100%, 13% among management. But that includes the 250 people who work in stadiums every year who get laid off every fall. Take 25% of that out. We're at a tiny fraction of the waterfront. We're also very good at knowing who our customers are. Don Morgan, who's here, has done our research for us. And here's a quick summary of what it looks like. National chains, restaurants are on the left side. Ours, seafood bars, are on the right side. Notice that a typical customer visits a restaurant once a month to every 6 weeks. Our typical customer visits us every 10 days. Go down to the next one, and you see that a person takes his dining out occasions to 6 to 8 places. Our customers give us half of their dining out occasions. Notice that our income and education skew very high, and people travel a long distance to get to us. Next rule of thumb, the food matters a lot. It's wild, it's local, it's sustainable, it's fresh. This is Chris Garr, the chef down at Acres of Clams. We also do a little analysis where we calculate the value of a guest. We know last week that the typical person who visited a seafood bar spent $12.89. And when he or she came, there were 1.6 more people with them. We know they come every 10 days. We don't know how long they come because we've only done this research for 21 years, so we assume 25 years. So the value of a person who comes into one of our seafood bars is almost $30,000. So when we screw up, we got to fix that, or we're saying goodbye to $30,000. Everybody in the company is authorized to do whatever is necessary it is to solve a problem for a guest. We have all kinds of ways that we allow customers to talk with us. The most interesting one is if you visit one of our stores and have a bad experience, when you leave, we ask you to go to tellivers.com. If you tell us you had a bad experience and give us your cell phone number or your email, within 2 hours, the manager, the district manager, the director of operations, or Frank, one of my partners, or I will call you and find out what happened. When we started this program, we had 35 red flags a day Now we have 13 red flags a month. Has anybody used Alaska Listens, their onboard comment system? That's our system. We weigh, measure, count everything. If you want to know what we sold in any restaurant in any 15-minute period since 1980, we can tell you. So we program everything so we know exactly what to expect. This is the fish in the fish bar at Acres of Clams earlier this week. We measure how much water loss there is. We measure how much bone loss there is. And here's another example of measuring, counting, weighing. When we opened at Safeco, we knew that the typical concession register, NBA, NHL, NCAA, sells $500 a game and serves one customer every 60 seconds. And we said that's way too slow. So we established a goal of $1,000 a register a game and serving one customer every 30 seconds. I worked the Seahawks game last weekend. Here are the numbers we did at the last game. $2,200 a register. And you can see why. Look at the picture down at the bottom. There's 43 people who were working in the booth I was working in. We make vendors our partners. This is the company that supplies our cod. It's a joint venture between some Ballard Norwegians and a Native Claims Settlement Act company up in Alaska. We buy 800,000 pounds of cod from this company on a handshake. If the cost of cod goes up during the year, we will give it more. If the price of cod goes down during the year, they'll rebate it to us. This is a relationship that's based on a handshake. Next, we are intimate with communities. There are several thousand organizations that we participate in boards of directors, charity auctions, help them. You can recognize most of them up there. We also, because we're private, manage for the long term. It's not about the month or the week or the day or the quarter or the year. We manage things by the decade. So this is a picture in January 2015 of the seawall. Who else do you know in town who would spend $30 million renovating the pier during all that construction? Well, we did. It hasn't paid back. We know that's going to happen, but over a decade it will. And then the last thing, perhaps our most important rule, is it's important to have fun. You've seen some coverage lately about the problems that Bertha had in the suit, that she ran into a pipe. It wasn't a pipe. This is what it was. So can I answer any questions? Do we have time, Ken? 2 minutes. What do we have? Go ahead.
Jeff?
There's a pending impact associated with the potential assessment with the improvements of the waterfront district. Can you comment on that?
So Mr. Davidson from the Aquarium and I were on the design committee and the operations committee for the park. And 2 years ago, when the original proposal came out to charge the property owners near the project $200 million, and the private property owners proposed 100, we said we're going to settle at $150 million. Remember what we settled at last Thursday? $160 million. I'm sorry I was wrong. The good news is that proposal costs a typical property owner, residential property owner, about $1,900, payable over 20 years. In our case, the assessment on Pier 54 is $662,000, payable over 20 years. That's $33,000 a year. We're going to see many more customers because of the park. We fully support it. And with the support of the rest of the community, it'll sail through the council unobstructed on January 24th, I think, when it comes to the council. I think it's a good deal. If the projections are right, we will see 2 to 3 times as many people on the waterfront when the park is done as we see today. That is somewhere between 15 and 21 million people compared to the 7 million who are down there today. That's it. We'll be here. One final thing, and that is everything I've just told you may be BS. So when you leave, we will give you an Ivar's gift card that will buy you lunch. Go into your favorite restaurant, have the experience, and send us a note and tell us if it was true or if it wasn't. Thanks.
A round of applause for Bob Donegan.